Hey, amazing collection girls. Um, I got asked today at the end of my talk because I didn't cover a big section that I wanted to cover, which was I just wanted to cover a couple of the kings. And so I got asked if I would do a little bonus video on covering the kings. I'm going to try to keep it in under 10 minutes. And if you want to watch it, great. And if you don't, that's fine. So the part that I didn't get to is that I wanted to cover 4 of Judah's kings and tell you a little bit about what happened in their lives, just to kind of whet your appetite with reading some of these kings. And again, I'm only talking about Judah's kings. When we talk about Israel's kings, Ahab and Jezebel are probably 2 of the most notorious, evil king and queen on Israel's side. I mean, really, really bad. And that is who Elijah is a prophet to, is during King Ahab's reign. And so when you read all about Elijah, it's going to totally overlap with Ahab and Jezebel on Israel's side. But I'm going to talk to you about 4 kings on Judah's side that are worth noting. The first one I want to talk about is he was a child, and his name was Joash. And actually, what makes him so special and different is that so his grandmother, already her name is Athaliah, is how I decided to pronounce it. So I'm going to call her Athaliah. Athaliah is his grandmother, and Athaliah was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel on the Israel side, okay? There was like this joint marriage at this point between the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, and Athaliah married Jehoram, the king on Judah's side. And they had Jehoram did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and mostly because his wicked wife, Athaliah, was pulling a lot of strings. I mean, the evil that kind of followed Jezebel and Ahab entered Judah at that point with Athaliah. Interesting, really interesting. Ready? So they have a kid, and their kid is named Ahaziah. And his rule, and Ahaziah was, again, he was the son of Athaliah and Jehoram. Athaliah from the Jezebel Ahab and Jehoram from Judah. They have a kid, Ahaziah. He rules for a very short period of time. He dies. Remember how I told you about the Queen Mother situation? So Queen Mother is liking the power. Athaliah likes the power. And so what she does is she goes and she has the entire royal line killed so that she can remain in power. So for a couple of years, Judah actually has a queen. They don't even have a king. Athaliah rules instead of a king because the line of David is dead. All of them, except one of Ahaziah's sisters took one of the heirs, Joash, and hid him with his nursemaid. She hid him in the castle, and nobody knew that he was an heir. And then when he was 6 years old, one of the head guys took him, surrounded him by guards, and ended up crowning him king. I think he was 7 years old whenever he was crowned king. And he rebuilt the temple that had been destroyed. So Joash, he started out good. Actually, he started out as a good king. Later on, though, he ended up having a lot of pride. He was reprimanded by the prophet Zechariah, and he didn't take well to the prophet's warnings. Imagine that. And so he had Zechariah killed. And when he had Zechariah killed, the people discovered what he had done to the prophet, and they rose up and they ended up killing Joash. So he started out as a good king, and he ended up his reign being a bad king. The next one I want to talk about is Hezekiah. Hezekiah was an on-again, off-again king. We have him listed as a good king who ended well as well. But he was really kind of like a lukewarm king. He was on again, off again, kind of non-committal. He compromised a lot, and then he was really committed to the Lord. He was just really kind of back and forth. He became king at age 25, and he ended up cleaning up the nation and the high places, and he did follow the Lord. So that's great. But he made a deal with the devil. He made a deal with Assyria. And again, remember that Assyria is really bumping up border-wise to the northern kingdom of Israel. But they're so far reaching. They're such a big empire that they're definitely affecting Judah. So anyway, he ends up making a deal with Assyria, and it ends up being kind of a deal with the devil. But Isaiah rebukes Hezekiah and guides him back, and he repents before the Lord. The Lord provided a miraculous victory against Assyria. But then Hezekiah gets really sick and he's going to die. And so he asks God not to let him die. So Isaiah comes back to him and he delivers the message, and this is very specific, that God is going to let him live another 15 years. And in those 15 years, he did do some good. He put together part of the book of Proverbs. But in those 15 years, he also fathered the next king, Manasseh. So Manasseh was conceived in those extra 15 years. And Manasseh, he didn't start out too good. So that was a little bit of a dangerous thing with those extra 15 years. However, with Hezekiah, pride also gets the best of him, and he ends up showing off his wealth to the Babylonians. He shows them where all the treasures in Judah are hidden and stored. And remember, who is the nation that took Judah into captivity? The Babylonians. So Isaiah kind of comes to him and he's like, listen, your pride is not only going to be the end of you, but it's going to be the end of the nation as of Judah as well. And the Babylonians are going to eventually take us into captivity because of what you've done. That's Hezekiah. And then Hezekiah, like I said, fathered Manasseh. Manasseh started off very poorly. He, in the early years of his life, he is engaged in witchcraft and sorcery, divination, and he's scary. And he starts actually following some of the Assyrian gods and trying to appease Assyria. And so he has his children pass through the fire to the Assyrian gods, which is so horrible to think about. I mean, it was child sacrifice. His own children, he was putting them through fire and sacrificing them to the little g gods of Assyria. However, this is interesting. Assyria came and took him captive. The Lord allowed him to be captured by Assyria. Interestingly enough, the Babylonians are the ones that took Judah. Okay, so this is way prior to any of that happening. The Assyrians capture Manasseh, and this is back during the time, double check, they led him away with a hook through his nose. And that's actually part of the you'll read that when in 2 Kings, they lead him away with a hook through his nose. And he repented in captivity, and the Lord restored him back to Judah, and he finished out his reign a very repentant king and a godly king and ruler. So he started out really evil, and you'll note whenever you make that little underline, he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. That's how he starts, but he actually ends up being a really good king. And then the last one that I want to cover is Josiah, who was another child king. He was crowned at age 8. He is one of only 4 kings of Judah. I don't know if I told you this, but there's only 8 out of 20 that end up being good kings. But 4 of the 8 start out good, end up bad. So Josiah is one of 4 that actually start out as a good king and end as a good king. He ends up finding the book of the law in the temple. This is how far removed they were from what they were supposed to do, and understanding the law and understanding what they were supposed to do. They were a lost people. The prophets were communicating with them what God was telling them, but they also were not writing down the things that we talked about today. They were not writing the law of themselves. They didn't understand what they were supposed to be doing, and they were ignoring the prophets. So here's the cool thing. He ends up finding the book of the law in the temple, and he reads it aloud, and he ends up having a tremendous conviction and repentance. And then he ends up reading it out loud to all the people, and they all rip their clothes, and they're all massively repentant. He goes around and he actually destroys a lot of the high places. Doesn't just destroy them, grinds them to powder, because he realizes what an abomination they are to the Lord. And the Lord is so pleased with how Josiah responds to this that he tells Josiah, listen, I am going to bring disaster to the people, but I will not do it during your lifetime, because you have honored me so with how you've handled yourself. 2 Kings 23:25 says, neither before nor after Josiah was there a king like him, who turned to the Lord as he did, with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his mind, and with all his strength, in accordance with all the laws of Moses. I will say this, though. However, later in his life, the pride does get the best of him as well, and he ends up picking a fight with Pharaoh Necho against the Lord. The Lord's like, don't do it, and he does it anyway. Picks a fight with Pharaoh Necho, and he ends up dying because of it. So anyway, those are just 4 of the kings that I wanted to outline for you that I didn't get a chance to do this week. It's so exciting to read about these kings, and then to know that it's just a glimpse that we get at their life. And then in Chronicles, it's going to go even deeper into who they are. And then we're going to get into the prophets, and the books of the prophets are really going to go into the prophecy that we're lacking in Kings, the detail around what the prophets are actually saying to these kings while they're prophesying to the kings. So it's a wild ride. It's going to be so fun. I hope you enjoyed your little bonus material, and I'll see y'all next Thursday. Bye.